Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Arizona State University's 10th annual Human Rights Film Festival. I know it says 11th annual on the screen, and this is because we were planning to have one last year, but as you know, because of COVID, we had to cancel like many other events, but that gave us the opportunity to go virtual this year. So welcome. We're very happy to have you. I want to start the festival today by acknowledging the Acapulco Odom and Peeposh peoples. It's their ancestral land and territories where Arizona State University sits. And it's the care and keeping of the land by these peoples that has allowed us to be here today. So I'd like to welcome and support our Native American audience, participants, and students, and welcome you today. I want to thank everyone for joining us early on a Saturday. I also want to specifically thank Arizona Humanities and Brenda Thompson and Samantha Anderson in particular for making the Human Rights Film Festival possible this year. I also want to thank my school, the School of Social Transformation, and in particular, Lisa Anderson, Tammy McKenzie, Jeannie Colquette, Kike Martin Palacios, and all the other staff who have made this, the behind the scenes efforts happen. And that's been a lot of work, so I appreciate that. I also want to thank my wonderful intern, Isabella Conta, for her enthusiastic and creative engagement with the festival. She's the one who did this wonderful slide that you're looking at. We're also extremely grateful to all the panelists and moderators for taking us beyond the content of these films and to really help understand and dig into the issues that they raise. They're the ones that make the Human Rights Film Festival unique and go beyond just watching a film. So before we get into this morning's panel, I just want to let you know that we also have a panel this afternoon called BLM in the Post-Industrial City, Notes from the Front Lines. And if you've ever lived in a big city or lived vicariously in one, like through watching The Wire or something like that, you know how fascinating, vibrant, and complex cities can be. They're also crucibles for some of the most urgent social issues that we face. So this session this afternoon will explore those complexities from the point of view of both Baltimore and Minneapolis. And you know, both, in particular, Minneapolis has been in the news because of the murder of George Floyd. So our panelists are going to share their stories about efforts from those cities to create spaces that foster well-being and care for the people. And hopefully we'll get an update from the front lines from George Floyd Square. You can find more information on all of the films in the film festival and all of the panelists at humanrights.asu.edu. And I think Jeannie will be posting that in the chat. Maybe we can remove the slide. Thank you. So for today, I'm very pleased to introduce the session on Indigenous rights and just transitions. Now, some of you may have heard the term eco-grief or the term climate anxiety. These express really well the alarm and distress and helplessness that many of us feel as we watch the forests in California and Australia and the Amazon burning, as we watch floods sweep away whole neighborhoods in Texas and around the world. But there are people actively trying to change this situation. And in these films and in this panel, we're going to hear firsthand from some of these folks, including Native leaders Casey Camp Hornik from the Ponca Nation of Oklahoma, as well as Nicole Horseherder from Navajo Nation. And we'll hear about what their communities are doing to resist the forces that are perpetuating climate change and fighting for a more sustainable future. So without further ado, I would like to ask Seth Levine to begin our first film. Thank you. And we're going to be transitioning in just a moment to the next film. But I want to let everybody know that this was only about half of the film. We were offering the full film for you to watch beforehand, and you can still watch the full film on the from the link that you should have received in your RSVP email. And you can watch that until the end of the day, unless you're lucky enough to have an ASU email address, and then you can watch it forever because we have it at the library streaming in perpetuity. So please watch the whole film if you have the opportunity. And we're going to switch now to our second feature, which is a short film by Roger Sorkin. And he's the director of a series of films that explore transitions from dirty fossil fuel-based energy to more sustainable types of energy. And he'll be joined on our panel after the film by Paul Hurt, who's ASU Emeritus Professor of Environmental Humanities and has worked a lot with Roger on his films and efforts, as well as Nicole Horseherder, who is Navajo Nation and who's been working a long time on environmental issues on Navajo Nation. And very excitingly, we also have Casey Camp Hornik, who you saw in the film. She'll be with us after we watch Navajo Nation in Transition. And without further ado then, I'll let after the film credits roll, Seth will transition us to the next film. So hang tight just a minute, and we'll see you in about 30 minutes for the panel discussion.
Right. Thank you everyone for watching those two beautiful films with us. My name is Tracy Perkins, and I'm an assistant professor here at Arizona State University in the School for Social Transformation. And it's my distinct pleasure to get to moderate our panel with 4 panelists, all of whom were involved with the production of the 2 films that we've just watched. And I will introduce them now. So we have from the film, the first film, Casey Camp Hornik. She is an elder and the environmental ambassador for the Southern Ponca tribe of what is now called Oklahoma. As a result of fracking, pipelines, and the Phillips 66 refinery, the Ponca people community live in one of the worst fossil fuel impacted areas in the United States. Casey is the drumkeeper of Ponca Pathata Women's Society, and she led her community to become the first tribe to recognize the rights of nature in tribal law in the US, and now directs the Ponca Rights of Nature campaign. Casey also serves as the chair of the Indigenous Council for the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. We also have Nicole Horseherder here today with us. Nicole is Dene Navajo, originally from the Black Mesa Plateau in northeastern Arizona. She began her environmental work bringing awareness to the misuse and mismanagement of groundwater by the coal mining operation on Black Mesa in 1999. Today, Nicole is the executive director of Tohnitsoni Ani, and she'll give us the correct pronunciation of that when she speaks, a grassroots organization whose mission is protecting Black Mesa water and aquifers. She has led multiple no coal campaigns against industry on Navajo lands. Currently, Nicole is focused on just transition work for the coal impacted communities on the Navajo Nation. Paul Hurt is a recently retired professor of environmental history and sustainability here at Arizona State. His publications include a book on the history of electric power in the US Northwest and British Columbia, titled The Wired Northwest, and more than 24 articles and book chapters on various topics of environmental history. Paul served as an elected member of the board of directors of the Salt River Project from 2016 to 2020, advocating for the transition to clean energy and assistance for affected workers and communities. And he's been working with Roger Sorkin on this film and others. And Roger Sorkin is the founder and executive director of the American Resilience Project, a mission-driven nonprofit documentary film production company. He teaches energy and environmental communication at the Fordham University Gabelli School of Business and serves on the Climate and Security Working Group at the Center for Climate and Security, on the Managed Retreat Expert Group with the American Society of Adaptation Professionals, and is a fellow with the Truman National Security Project. So thank you all so much for being here. It's a pleasure to get to be in conversation with you. And I'd like to open up our panel broadly by asking you all to just share some reflections on the films that we've just seen. Some of you had seen both of them before. Some of you were just seeing one of them right now. So can you just share a few broad reflections, and then we'll get into some questions from there. And audience members, please do post questions for our panelists in the Q&A section.
Tracy, do you have a, it would help me if you just call out a name for each one of us.
Well, since we're unmuted, let's begin with you.
Oh, righty.
Yes.
Datia Ijuzi Witike Mashte Banka, Oklahoma. Uahe Tamajikte Tinake Kankagi Teati Ijiji Casey Camp Hornik. I told you my Ponca name and that I'm from here in Oklahoma. And my colonized name is Casey Camp Hornik. I'm an elder that lives here. I wanted to say thank you to all of you and to tell you I appreciate being here among you. And I want to make a proper greeting to Nicole, Roger, Paul, and you, Tracy, in a good way to open this up. I think very simply for me, it is seeing the message that our Mother Earth and our Father Sky is calling on us to make on the behalf of the generations to come. And I saw that in both films.
Thank you. Nicole, can we hear from you?
Yeah. So I didn't get a chance to see the first film, but I did get to see all the clips from this presentation today. So, and I just feel like after seeing all the, especially the Indigenous people out there really speaking out for Mother Earth and her children, creation. I think there's just so much to learn from Indigenous people. That's what came to my mind. As far as the film Current Revolution, I think that it really shows a nation in transition, and I'm really proud of the way that the film really focused on a part of transition that doesn't usually get told here on Navajo, with as far as the Navajo generating station goes, and that is we were able to talk about the water. We were able to take a little bit deeper dive and talk about the water and talk about environmental issues, health issues, because ever since Navajo Generating Station has been in operation, and Navajo has been powering Arizona, literally, that the story that's been told over and over again is jobs and revenue. And the story that has been undertold or not told is environment and the depletion of precious water sources on Diné lands so that this operation could happen, and so that Phoenix and Tucson can grow, and and all that growth is being shouldered by Indigenous people, Indigenous Diné and Hopi people in northern Arizona. So I think it's a story well told.
Roger, let's hear from you.
Great, thank you. So, I'll keep it brief. I mean, my general feeling is that you have to make sure, to Nicole's point, everybody, because these transition stories are so complex and really energy touches every aspect of human life, no matter where we live in the planet. There are a lot of key players, and I hate the term, but I can't think of a better one. Stakeholder analysis requires that we literally identify all of the people who need to be at the table and all of the communities that need to be at the table to make sure that as we undertake this sort of transition, whether that's energy or agriculture or anything, really, I mean, we recognize that there are so many changes that are required of us to maintain a stable society that everyone can have clean air, clean water, health, and access to nutritious food. We really need to make sure that we bring everyone and their respective concerns to the table. Because if one of the parties that's not at the table feels disrespected, it's really hard to move this collective effort forward. So I think it's in everyone's best interest, whether they're part of a utility company or some other big business or government agency. It's going to be easier to move this complexity forward when everybody feels that their voice is being heard. And the challenge for me, not being of the Navajo Nation, coming in from Massachusetts, understanding that I had a lot to learn going in. I wanted to make sure that I was just going to really present the priority that the subjects in the film underscored as priority. I think a danger for any filmmaker or storytellers to go in with a preconceived narrative. I mean, I went in with sort of my mission, which is the mission of our organization, our nonprofit. But my narrative was I went in expecting to be educated by people like Nicole and others who wanted to steer us away from the simple conversation about, oh, we just need to do more technical training and then everything will be fine. There's a real backstory, and there's a mitigation, remediation effort that needs to be undertaken in any transition story. And one thing we're trying to do with our film is not just talk about the coal to renewables transition on Indigenous land, but use this example and this experience to help inform other communities. So, we hope to go to the Gulf Coast of Louisiana and help petrochemical communities transition away from that economic dependence, and really try to highlight the best practices in this particular film that are applicable to other parts of the country and the world.
I guess I'm up. Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate you helping put this together and moderating the panel. I should start by saying now that I'm retired, I'm not in Phoenix area. I'm in far southeastern Arizona in Cochise County, and I'm living happily on lands traditionally owned by the Chiricahua Apaches. In fact, Cochise himself had camps here in the Chiricahua Mountains where I'm living now. So I want to extend my gratitude to the Native people for taking care of this land and loving this land for so many generations. Since I was involved in the production of Nation in Transition, I don't need to say anything about that. It speaks for itself. But The Condor and the Eagle was very interesting for me to watch, in part because I started in on my young adulthood in my 20s and early 30s. I was a full-time environmental activist before I got my PhD and became a professor. I was out there in the trenches fighting for environmental protection and sustainable resource management and environmental justice. And I love seeing the next generation taking up the battle and using new tools and new strategies to address the issues that we face today, some of which are the same issues that we've been facing for decades or generations. Others are new. We didn't have any clue that climate change was happening to us back in the early 1980s when I started working on environmental issues, and now it's one of the top issues of concern to everybody. So I was very heartened to see how many Indigenous communities are fighting and organizing and communicating with each other, and how many young people are involved, because the fight will go on forever. And we need to encourage and support the next generation to take up the battle and keep fighting for justice and resilience, and in this troubled but beautiful world that we live in.
Thank you. So today's film session is about Indigenous rights and just transitions. Just transitions need to happen the world over, clearly. But there are particular kinds of opportunities and challenges for Indigenous nations. So Casey and Nicole, could you speak to some of those? Maybe Nicole, starting with you. Oh, and we need you to unmute.
Can you please just repeat that question?
Can you speak to how just transitions happening on Native lands might be different than those that need to happen elsewhere? Or
Yeah, so so you know, there's places in Colorado where coal plants are shutting down, and the utility that didn't need to be brought back to the table to reinvest in the community. We have, and I don't remember all the names now, but they were part of my presentation when I was talking to SRP about the need for transition funds. And, you know, there are all these utility companies who know that coal is phasing out, they're phasing out. And so they jump on with renewables, and they bring renewables right back into the community, and have been helping communities up in the millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, to revive economies that are declining because of the closure of coal plants. Here in Arizona, because the largest coal plant is Navajo Generating Station, which Navajo doesn't own, even though it's named Navajo Generating Station. It's one of the biggest power plants west. It's the biggest power plant west of the Mississippi. That's how it's described. And the headwaters of the operation start right here on Dene lands in northeast Arizona. And so Dene water and Dene coal is used to power this big furnace, and all this energy is used by central southern Arizona, and for many years the city of Los Angeles and Nevada. And so literally the Navajo Nation and the Hopi tribes were powering these large, and we're responsible for the growth in all these big cities. And so bringing these same utilities back to the table has not been easy. I don't know if it's just Arizona or you know, I don't know what it is, but it just seems like coming back to help Native communities is something that utilities here like to just kind of sidestep. And so we've been trying to make a case that's compelling enough to get the utilities to come back to the table. And then talking about transition is also a really big thing too, because it's not just a matter of going back into the community and reinvesting in renewables. It's about the way that these contracts were written in the past. We don't want a repeat of the way that NGS contract was written with Navajo Nation, where we had to waive water rights, where we had to waive taxes and right-of-ways and those kinds of things. No, when they come back, the structure has to be different. And so that's something that we're really pushing for. And we're trying to put water at the forefront. I mean, we've been water protectors right from the start. Here on Black Mesa, we coined water is life, you know, 20 years ago when we were trying to save our water. And we're putting these issues. So while the rest of Arizona is still trying to figure out how to act like it's in a water crisis, we are already, as Indigenous communities, in a water crisis. And so what the rest of Arizona just needs to do is follow us, and we'll show you how to act and what it looks like to really be in a water crisis. And, you can't just say it and then continue existing like as if there is no water crisis. You've got to start acting like you're going to protect it, you're going to save it, you're not going to use it for, all these wasteful projects and businesses, and you've got to start treating it like it's the sacred live element of life that it really is. So I'm sorry, I might go off a little bit longer, but I know I'm on this panel with others, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, you're on the panel because we want to hear what you think. So thank you. Casey, is there anything you can add about any specificities of just transitions that are unique perhaps, or the same on Indigenous lands as opposed to those that need to happen elsewhere?
Both of those words apply, unique and the same. It's unique because she's coming from a portion of the earth that is different than the portion of the earth that I reside on right now, which is originally Wichita territory. My people are part of the forced removal peoples that came here to Oklahoma. So from the time of the 1800s, when Andrew Jackson was in office until Trump was, we've had similar policies that were made to destroy us. In Oklahoma, there are 39 federally recognized tribes. 36 of us are here from forced removals from other territories. And so our issues have stemmed from before the time that we were forcibly removed into this territory. We were the ones that lived along the Missouri River and Nishude and the Niobrara in what is now called Nebraska. It's a Ponca word, Ni-Badaska, meaning land where the water is flat, right to the surface. And from that time that we had 5 treaties abrogated by the federal government and ceded over 2.4 million acres to retain a small township. And then our land was, and this is a government, I don't know how they could call it a mistake, but they said they made a mistake and gave the Lakota the small territory that we were living on. To the time that we walked those 670 miles, my grandfather was just a child of 6 when he came down here with his parents. We have had a series of treaty rights that have not been upheld, so our sovereignty has not existed. The trust responsibility of every single governmental branch has also failed in the manner in which they agreed to treat us. The BIA, in the name of economic development, sold off much of our land here, and you've got to understand, if you have the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which incepted under the War Department into your life, that it's like being born with someone else having the power of attorney over every decision. So for the Ponca people, we ended up with the largest, it's a refinery, it's tank batteries, it's pipelines, it's any number of environmental, what they call stressors in the EPA, but they are actually inflictors of environmental genocide. So we're in our biggest wave of genocide that we've ever experienced. Our people, every single family is impacted by cancers. Every single family has autoimmune diseases rampant. Every child might have asthma in our territory. And at least enough to know. I noticed one time that my grandson, who's been hospitalized every year with asthma because of the air quality here, had he and his friends know to borrow inhalers from one another. They're in everybody's pocket because of the way that we have to live right now. And we can't grow organic food within a 12-mile radius of our tribal headquarters. So we are the communities the most impacted, and yet we do not get employment from those petroleum-based companies, from those fossil fuel industries. So our unemployment is up around 60 and 70%. And the rest are those that are employed by government grants to our tribe that employ a few people into programs. So while we are dealing with the day-to-day survival, literally, the petroleum-based people continue to pay their taxes into Oklahoma. The state of Oklahoma then benefits. Everyone else benefits, and we're on the front lines. We're the ones dealing with water that's defiled, and that is, where our children swim, where we fish, where the deer eat. Even the cattle that belong to the ranchers and the farmers around here are drinking and eating from this contaminated soil and from the contaminated water and breathing methane gas, because fracking and injection wells has not only used the fresh water, but it also is letting methane gas, which is 83% more toxic than the carbon that is let into the air. So just transition looks to us as if we're going to need a Superfund site in order to even exist. We live in a very small, tight territory, and I don't think it's going to be able to be cleaned up. So just transition looks like maybe we take a whole step back and we hire a whole bunch of people from the Indigenous nations to help do the solar powers and maybe wind energy, although that ties into the coal-fired generating plant that's right down the road from us, because they buy the electric. We're not in a win-win-win. We're in a lose-lose-lose situation here, and struggling to find what is a just transition for us. For us, it means the right to eat, drink, and breathe. So it's beyond even human rights, because humans got to understand. They look at us and we call ourselves water protectors, land defenders. And I have generations before and after me that are doing that. But in reality, we're not protecting nature. We are nature trying to protect itself. How do we realign natural laws with human laws?
Thank you. So I'm going to take a related question from the audience. This is from Aisha Trejo, if I'm saying your name correctly. I hope I am. Aisha writes, so these two films have opened a new perspective to me that I wouldn't have known about Indigenous rights and issues prior. Like Nicole had shared, coal and pipeline companies justify the taking of land and selling oil drilling rights to other governments by offering job opportunities to lower income communities. And it seems like the effects of the pollution are not widely recognized by the public eye. And then here's the question. What are some of the most dangerous or largest oil pipeline companies that need to be halted? And maybe whoever wants to take that, just kind of signal with your hand and we can start there.
All of them.
All of them. Casey?
And transfer, yes.
I was saying certainly the pipelines that extend from Canada down into the main petroleum processing areas in the United States, including down in Louisiana, where they can then be shipped across the country. Those are the biggest, most important ones to stop, because they're not just local. They are allowing the continuing exploitation of the tar sands up in Alberta. Canada can't possibly use all of that carbon-based, sludgy, tarry fossil fuels up in Alberta. They can only develop that if they have external markets, both in the United States and overseas. And the only way to get that tar sands petroleum overseas is to get it down to processing facilities that have access to ocean shipping, like New Orleans, for example, and Houston. So stopping the pipelines that are interstate and international are probably the most important ones to stop. And that would be, the ones that Casey's been working on, and the ones that the first film, The Condor and the Eagle, talked about. Keystone XL pipeline, and the other one that was renamed, I've forgotten a new name.
Thank you. So let's move on. We've got a number of questions related to how to take action against these problems. So, for example, from Kiara Ortloff, I'm curious about what you believe has been the most effective ways of enacting environmental change so far. For example, cultural shift or legal protections, etc. Other people raised inquiries about the Women's Treaty or the everyday actions of all of us. Can you all weigh in on what should we be doing? And yeah, Roger, let's start with you.
Well, I would want to defer to Casey and Nicole for specifically what can be done from their perspectives on their own lands. But I would say more generally for everybody who's watching, there is no amount of civic action that you cannot take. You have layers of government. You've got your local legislators, your congressional representatives, all of your state, county. As I said before, everybody is involved with this energy transition, whether we want to be or not. There's just no way to do this without touching every aspect of our economy and our lives. And so every layer of government needs to be doing something about it within whatever power they have. And you might find that your local county commissioner hasn't thought about an energy transition yet. Maybe they heard about it and they thought, well, that's too complicated. I'll just leave that for the next person to take office. Everybody needs to step up now, and we as citizens and residents of communities just need to keep on making noise. I live in a small town of about 30,000 people. Fortunately, our mayor has already started talking about this stuff. But there are a lot of other towns of 30,000 people where you say the phrase energy transition and either people will say, I don't know what that is, or they'll think it's something that just happens on a bigger scale someplace else that someone else has to deal with. We all have some sort of role to play. And there's certainly enough tasks to go around. So I would just say get involved with your local government, your state government, and the federal government.
Thank you. Nicole, can you weigh in here?
I would just say that I would just, I'm going to just echo exactly what Roger said. I mean, groups like ours have had a growing voice on the reservation, on our own lands. But the voice that needed to be heard was the one outside the reservation, like within the state of Arizona. We've been engaging with the Arizona Corporation Commission, which is the regulatory entity of the utilities here in Arizona, and working with allies, non-Indigenous allies, and on media strategies and things like that. But I would, if you're going to go out there and try to get something done, I think it's really wise to look at every single strategy that's available to you and just start doing whatever you have the resources to do and expand as you go. I mean, taking legal action on something is just as important as writing letters, which is more diplomatic. And all of those are important. The more pressure you can put on people who are making decisions about your life and your people, the better it is. And you just have to keep the pressure on. And we work with non-Indigenous allies as well as our own Indigenous groups here on the reservation.
Great. Paul, what about you?
Remember to unmute myself this time. Yeah, the question is really important because what it points to is the complexity of the problem and all the different ways that people can engage in trying to solve the problem and move us forward. The question asked is, what's most effective? Is it legal action? Is it cultural change? Is it promoting the treaty rights at an international level? Is it everyday action by each individual? And every single one of those is a good strategy. It's always been my philosophy that, each person has their own interests, their own values, the things that really drive their passion. They have their own skills. Some people are really good public speakers, others freeze up when they have to do public speaking. Some people are good writers and can write a great letter to the editor. Other people are much better interacting on a personal basis between people. Some people are entrepreneurs and would like to start a green business to try to replace the old dirty business. So what you have to do is, if you want to engage, and I hope that everybody who's watching today does want to engage, I hope you're inspired to be a change maker, to want to make a difference in the world. Just ask yourself, number one, what are my skills? What would I really be motivated to apply myself to? And if you're an introvert, just make changes in your daily life and model them for your friends and family. If you like engaging in the public arena, think about attending a city council meeting or the Arizona Corporation Commission meeting that sets policies for electric utility companies. There are so many ways that you can engage, but do a little introspection first and ask yourself, how would you like to engage? And what skills do you have that you can bring to the table? And then secondly, and I'll shut up after this, join an organization that's already doing work. They will have resources available for you. They'll be able to guide you. They'll be able to give you the background on what's already been done and what campaigns they already have going. And you can say, oh, I like that campaign. What can I do to help? That's the way to fit in. That's how I became an activist. I decided one day way back in 1981 that I had been spending years hiking in the mountains and enjoying nature and thinking within myself that I really loved having that experience of being surrounded by a natural environment, the peace and quiet of a mountainside with a stream flowing through. And I wanted to protect it, but I had never done anything to protect it. I hadn't joined any organization. I hadn't written any letters. I just knew that I valued wild nature, but had never done anything, to put my money where my mouth was. So I showed up cold at a Sierra Club meeting and I said, what can I do? And within about a year, I was running a campaign to designate wilderness areas on the Coronado National Forest in Southern Arizona. There are so many volunteer organizations that are looking for another volunteer with a little bit of time and a little bit of passion to make a difference. Most of the environmental organizations and Indigenous rights organizations don't have paid staff. And they don't have professionals who got PhDs in how to be an environmental activist. They're just regular people like you. So go join a group, attend a meeting, and ask, what can I do to help?
Wonderful, thank you. Casey, can you share some of your insights on how people in the audience can get involved and what you see the best avenues for making change as?
Yeah, first, I appreciate everyone else's thoughts, and I echo support for each and every one of them. I would remind everyone that 80% of today's natural resources is what they're called. I call them sources of life. I never put that word "re" on there because they're not resources. 80% of the sources of life are still in the hands of Indigenous peoples. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that we have been taught in our value system often in our original instructions, that we are an intricate portion of all that is. Intricate portion of the children, as Nicole said, the children of earth, which is all things in all forms of life. I heard one of our esteemed panelists talk about wild nature. And it reminded me that of all the things in so-called nature, human beings are the only ones that are wildly out of tune. That all other things, even if you looked at the COVID situation, the deer still grazed and gave birth and drank and followed their paths. The eagles the same way, the gophers the same way, the worms the same way, the water the same way, the air, the wind still blew. Humans getting out of the way made a difference for them because we're the stumbling block. So if we begin to take that personal responsibility, and in whatever form we're living right now, whether I find this word activist kind of overdone these days. If you're acting human and taking responsibility for who you are and the gift of being here on earth, I think that's being an activist, because you're supposed to be actively doing something to earn that right to participate, actively caring for the plants. So maybe grow a plant if you need to, in your patio, in your kitchen windows. Get to know what the living things are that are giving you life, the things that you eat. Pay attention to the breath of the winds that come. That wind has been everywhere, and it's going to go over these coal-fired generating plants and these refineries. It's going to blow to you. It's not stagnant. It doesn't just sit over us, even though a great deal of it does impact us much stronger than anywhere else because it's first here. But it's going to blow where you are. The water that flows here, it's going to flow where you are. It's going to rise into the Thunder Nation. It's going to rain down somewhere. It's innate survival that one needs to tap into right now. For us in the Ponca territory, as well as around the world, we have found that taking responsibility, personal responsibility, clan and family and tribal responsibility comes into form right now of enacting laws that are called the rights of nature, that are recognizing what has always been in existence and giving it a form, like the colonizers' law is given a form, like the, what is that, papal bull edict, the doctrine of discovery, gave them the ability to come onto our territory and say, because you're not Christian, then we have the right to everything. Like somebody might walk in your front door, imagine that, and you invite them in and say, do you need something to eat and drink? And they just push you on out the back door and say, no, I'm gonna have this whole place. Everything that you thought is yours, you're gone now, and this belongs to me. That's what has happened to the Indigenous people. And yet our value system is that of caring for our neighbors. So if you uphold Indigenous rights, whether it's through the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, if you ask, excuse me, your people to enact the rights of nature through policies and in your cities, if you demand that your elected officials recognize that there is more than human rights that are involved here. There are the rights of the generations to come, and that's their rights too. You know, they all have children. There's 1,000,000 things to do. And the thing to do now is to warrior up and start today if you want our species to continue to be part of the sacred life cycle.
Thank you. There's actually a few questions that have come in for you, Casey, about the women's treaty. Are you still traveling for that? And could you update us on that effort, or perhaps any other international efforts you're participating in?
Yeah, COVID has kind of allowed me to have a rest this year, except for Zooming. I had to learn how to Zoom. The great grandma zooming around has always been pretty funny in my family, but they've taught me how to do it. And yes, international travel is continuing when it's safe for all. Again, COVID has made the planes stay home, and that's less carbon in the air, less traveling on the roads. But I think I will be at the UN climate talks, because we've got to be able to say, you know, the Paris Agreement isn't stringent enough. Things are exponential at this time. The things that humans thought would be we have way out here now, this time to do that, has accelerated to such a degree that we have to do more acting at a larger pace, and to help humans understand the impact that we have to make for us to continue. So yes, I am traveling, and yes, I am at home more. I think that the treaty is online somewhere. I'm not real familiar with how to do computer stuff, but it is a personal commitment. It doesn't demand that we be someplace to participate in that. It is coming together at a ceremonial moment of the new moon, coming together at the equinox and the solstices, and to take action very clearly through prayer. And prayer is the joining of all thoughts and minds together, and imploring to the great mystery to gather us together for a healing that has to happen. We all talk about saving Earth. She's fine. She's fine. She's in a moment of purification right now, and that moment might take 100 years or more. But she's purifying herself through these weather events that they call climate change. That's gonna happen. How do we mitigate? How do we encourage others to be part of this wonderful healing that we're participating in? Those are things we can do from our home, thanks to this magical web of life way they call a webinar and computers. We're sharing with with each other and through these young people, because they are the future. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We are just about out of time, so I think we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for your wise words, Casey and Nicole and Roger and Paul. And it's been a pleasure to get to virtually meet you. I hope our paths cross again. And I'm going to turn it over to LaDawn Hagland to close us out.
I am very pleased to have been able to participate as an attendee in this wonderful conversation. I love this quote. This quote is going on my wall from Casey. We are nature trying to protect itself. And I think that's just a beautiful sentiment. And I also love the, it's time to warrior up thing. So thank you so much to all of you for your really inspiring work and for your tireless efforts really over a lifetime. Every single one of you have spent so much of your lives just trying to protect Mother Earth and make it a place that isn't so destructive. And that is a really precious gift that you've given us. So thank you so much. And I'm going to just close by reminding people that we have one more panel this afternoon. And if you want to join us, we'll start around 3 o'clock. Actually, probably 3:15 is going to be more like our start time. And it's going to cover some of the issues that have come up with Black Lives Matter. So again, thanks to Arizona Humanities for making this possible. Thanks to the ASU Library, the School of Social Transformation staff, Isabella, my intern, and all of you wonderful panelists. I hope that we can stay in touch as we move forward. And thanks, just thanks from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
Thank you, LaDon.